The vast blue sky was reflected through the window of West Sky Airlines Flight 658. The plane glided smoothly between the clouds, carrying passengers in the first-class cabin. Everything inside was serene with soft lighting from the overhead lamps and the subtle aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Passengers reclined in their plush seats, some engrossed in their favorite books, while others worked on their laptops. Among them was a black woman named Mariah Wells, 40 years old, with a composed and understated demeanor. She wore a black leather jacket paired with a gray sweater and dark trousers, appearing elegant yet unassuming. No one could tell that Mariah was not just an ordinary passenger. She was a customer service quality supervisor for West Sky Airlines, quietly observing and recording every aspect of the passenger experience on this flight with humility and meticulous attention. Seated near the aisle, Mariah discreetly tucked her notebook into her bag, her eyes scanning every detail. The flight attendants serviced their announcements and passengers' reactions to the service. She missed nothing, no matter how small. Mariah sipped her hot coffee and appeared to read a newspaper, but in reality, she was analyzing everything around her, a sharp instinct honed over years of observation. A few rows ahead sat a man named Alan Turner, 45 years old, a businessman with an air of arrogance. Dressed in a tailored suit and sporting a luxury watch on his wrist, his restless demeanor betrayed his composed exterior. Alan repeatedly glanced at his watch and checked his phone, seemingly anxious about running late. The plane continued to glide effortlessly across the sky, and the cabin returned to a tranquil state. With just a few minutes left before landing, most passengers began packing their belongings in preparation for disembarkation. However, the calm was abruptly shattered by a loud shout. "Where's my wallet?" Alan's voice was filled with anger and panic, causing everyone in the cabin to turn and look. He jumped from his seat, startling the passengers around him. A flight attendant quickly approached, maintaining a professional demeanor, but visibly flustered by Alan's outburst. "Mr. Turner, please remain calm," she said gently, trying to de-escalate the situation. "Are you sure your wallet didn't fall under your seat? I can help you check again." However, Alan impatiently brushed her hand aside. "No. Someone took it. My wallet was right here. Someone stole my wallet." Whispers and uneasy glances began spreading throughout the cabin. Suspicious eyes eventually landed on Mariah, the only black woman sitting quietly nearby. Alan suddenly pointed a finger at her, shouting, I saw you looking at me earlier. You took my wallet, didn't you?" Mariah slowly raised her head, her expression calm but her eyes firm and resolute. She refused to let such baseless accusations rattle her, though a storm brewed inside her. She maintained her composure, determined not to let this man trample her dignity. "Excuse me, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice cold yet steady. "I was just reading my newspaper. I don't know what you're accusing me of." Although her response was measured and anger simmered beneath Mariah's calm exterior, she felt the weight of the accusatory stares from those around her. This wasn't just an absurd situation, it was a deeply offensive attack on her character. She had faced moments like these before, where people judged her solely by the color of her skin and leaped to unfounded conclusions. As the plane began its descent, tension in the cabin reached its peak. Alan, seething with rage, could no longer contain himself. "Call the police." "She stole my wallet," he bellowed, drawing even more attention. Passengers murmured among themselves, their curious gazes fixed on Mariah. She stood firm, refusing to show any sign of panic despite the tense atmosphere. Suddenly, Alan stepped forward and slapped Mariah across the face, leaving the entire cabin in shock. Mariah didn't react immediately, but within moments she struck back, slapping him hard enough to make him stagger. Alan retaliated with a wild punch, but Mariah managed to dodge it, countering with a solid blow to his stomach that made him collapse to his knees. The scene escalated rapidly as two young police officers boarded the plane upon landing. Instead of diffusing the situation, they sided with Alan. One officer grabbed Mariah's arms and punched her hard in the face, making her reel from the impact. The other kneed her in the stomach, causing her to step back in pain. Undeterred, the first officer struck her again, leaving Mariah momentarily dazed. Despite being outnumbered, Mariah refused to back down. She stood her ground, fighting back with every ounce of strength she had, determined not to let these men crush her spirit. The cabin descended into chaos as passengers watched in horror, witnessing a gross display of injustice unfold before their eyes. The heavy tension filled the air, And at that exact moment, a commanding voice echoed from the back of the cabin, breaking the suffocating silence. "What is going on here, Captain Ethan Wells?" A tall man in a crisp uniform stepped out from the cockpit. Every step he took exuded authority, silencing the atmosphere in the cabin. His sharp gaze swept across the crowd as if instantly assessing the situation. Alan, his face contorted with anger and his hands trembling, pointed at Mariah and shouted, "This black woman," he bellowed. "She looked at me earlier. My wallet is gone, and I'm sure she took it." Alan's fury erupted, his eyes blazing with resentment. Frustration and a sense of loss clouded his judgment, leaving him unable to think clearly. Instead, his indignation was unfairly directed at the innocent woman before him. Mariah felt her heart tighten at Alan's accusations. She tried to take a deep breath to maintain her composure, but the injustice weighed heavily on her. She couldn't believe she was being accused so baselessly over a missing wallet. Anger welled up inside her, but she knew she couldn't let outrage cloud her reason. "It wasn't me. Let me go. You have no right to detain me without evidence. I didn't do anything wrong," she shouted. Captain Wells approached, his gaze shifting between Mariah and Alan, calm but piercing. He looked at Mariah for a moment, then turned to Alan. "Ma'am," he began, his voice steady but authoritative, "to resolve this quickly, we need to check your belongings." Mariah raised an eyebrow, her voice unwavering. "Captain," she said coldly, "are you accusing me based solely on this man's unfounded claim?" Captain Wells hesitated, briefly, then nodded resolutely. "This is a security matter, not a personal accusation. I must ask for your cooperation." The cabin fell into a breathless silence. All eyes were on Mariah as Alan slowly opened her bag. He rifled through each compartment with haste, desperate to find his wallet there. But no, the bag contained only personal items, a novel, a neatly folded scarf, and no wallet. Suddenly a voice boomed from the back of the cabin, shattering the silence. "Enough! Stop this nonsense!" All eyes turned toward an older woman seated in the last row. Her name was Margaret Ellis. She stood with determination, her sharp gaze fixed on Alan. Pointing toward his seat, she spoke with unwavering conviction. "Your wallet slid under your seat during takeoff. I saw it happen." The entire cabin was stunned into silence. Passengers stared at Margaret in shock, and then murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Margaret's words swept away the doubt that Alan had sown. Embarrassment crept across his face as the critical gazes of the other passengers turned on him. A few passengers, unable to contain their anger, moved closer to Alan, their patience worn thin. "You need to apologize to her immediately," one man in the front called out furiously. "She didn't do anything wrong, and you falsely accused her," another added. "That's right, you have no right to accuse someone without proof." Passengers began gathering around Alan, voices of criticism and condemnation rising. "Apologize. You can't keep hurting people like this," a woman demanded, her face full of indignation, her eyes glaring at Alan like he was the enemy. Mariah stood quietly, saying nothing, but a sense of relief washed over her as the support from the passengers unfolded. She no longer needed to defend herself because the truth had spoken for itself. Everyone in the cabin stood against Alan. There was no one left to take his side. The injustice Mariah had endured was now met with fairness. As the situation gradually calmed, Mariah stood still for a moment, letting the passengers' eyes fall on her. Suddenly, she gave a faint, resolute smile. She was no longer silent. She decided to speak up and make things clear. "So not only have you hurt me," Mariah began, her voice calm but cutting, "but you've also wasted everyone's time on this flight." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And I think it's time I reveal a few important things." She paused briefly, ensuring everyone in the cabin was focused on her every word. Mariah's gaze swept over the passengers, landing on the captain and Mr. Allen. "My name is Mariah Wells." She began, her voice steady and deliberate. "I am the Quality Assurance Supervisor for Customer Service at West Sky Airlines. I was assigned to monitor and ensure the company's service standards. Today I have observed many things during this flight." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin as the passengers began to realize the situation was not as they had assumed. She continued, "Captain Wells, I regret to inform you that your behavior in this situation has been unprofessional. Instead of handling the matter objectively, you allowed your personal emotions to interfere with your responsibilities. This is not how a professional in the aviation industry should act." Alan's face turned pale with confusion and worry as he heard her words. The once confident Captain Wells now appeared embarrassed, his confidence shaken. Mariah pressed on, giving them no opportunity to respond. "And you?" Mr. Allen acted impulsively and unfairly. "You caused unnecessary stress and hurt an innocent person over a missing wallet. Furthermore, your actions were discriminatory, and you immediately called the police to humiliate me. Now I demand a public apology from both of you." The cabin fell into an icy silence as she finished her statement. The tension was palpable until Alan, his face flushed with embarrassment, stammered, I sincerely apologize, Mariah. I was wrong. I shouldn't have acted that way. I let my emotions override my judgment." Captain Wells looked at Mariah, his previously arrogant demeanor replaced by genuine remorse. He lowered his head slightly and said, "I apologize, Mariah. I shouldn't have let this situation escalate. I will learn from this moving forward." Unexpectedly, the two police officers who had been standing nearby stepped forward cautiously. One of them spoke up, "We apologize for not assessing the situation more thoroughly. This won't happen again." Mariah stood silently observing them without responding. She didn't need their apologies, but their public acknowledgement validated her stance and proved that justice could prevail. Looking around the cabin one last time, she returned to her seat, relieved that things were finally back on track. The passengers, now less anxious or curious, returned to their activities. Yet a lingering discomfort remained in the atmosphere, and traces of suspicion were evident in some glances. Some passengers sighed audibly, while others exchanged quiet looks as though reflecting on what had just unfolded. But the story was far from over. 6 months have passed since that turbulent flight, and the ripples of what happened at 30,000 feet continue to reshape lives and policies alike. Mariah Wells returned to her role as quality assurance supervisor at West Sky Airlines with a renewed sense of purpose. After the outpouring of passenger support and the captain's public apology, the airline launched an industry-leading anti-bias training program for all staff. Mariah now chairs a monthly forum where flight crews review real-world scenarios and practice de-escalation techniques. Attendance is mandatory, and feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. The small community of passengers who stood by her that day has grown into an informal advocacy network, Sky Allies, that raises awareness of racial profiling in travel. Their online platform has over 1,000 members, many sharing stories that echo Mariah's, and West Sky has pledged to contribute a portion of every first-class ticket sold towards scholarships for students studying criminal justice reform and conflict resolution. On the law enforcement side, Alan Turner faced internal affairs review and ultimately received a formal reprimand. He volunteers now at a local youth mentoring program, speaking candidly about how prejudice nearly cost him his integrity. Captain Wells was transferred to training and became a vocal champion for passenger rights, often inviting Mariah to address new cadets about the importance of humility and respect. The two young officers who first reached for their badges that day were assigned to community outreach teams, where they partner with local organizations to build bridges with minority neighborhoods. Even Margaret Ellis, the grandmother in row 32, was honored at a West Sky ceremony for her courage. Her eyewitness testimony now features in the airline's safety video. As for Mariah herself, she quietly settled into a routine of early morning runs and weekend workshops. But every time she walks onto a plane, she carries more than luggage. She carries hope that one courageous stand can transform an entire system. Though prejudice still lingers in subtle corners of the sky and on the ground, the events of that day have proven that vigilance, unity, and a refusal to stay silent can set in motion lasting change, reminding us all that 6 months later, justice is not just a distant ideal, but an ongoing journey. 1 year later, the reverberations of that midday confrontation still echo through the airline and beyond. Mariah Wells has been promoted to Director of Passenger Relations at West Sky, where she oversees the very anti-bias training she helped launch. In the past 12 months, every flight attendant and pilot has completed a rigorous Respect in the Air certification, and customer experience surveys now include explicit questions about fairness and dignity. Complaints of profiling have dropped by 40%, and West Sky's board credits that decline directly to the new policies Mariah championed. Sky Allies, the passenger advocacy network born from a handful of in-flight witnesses, has grown into a registered nonprofit. Its annual conference, first convened online 6 months ago, filled a downtown convention center this fall with nearly 1,000 attendees, law students, retired air marshals, and everyday travelers sharing strategies for change. Scholarships funded by first-class ticket surcharges have sent 5 young people to study conflict resolution and aviation law, and 2 of those scholars have interned at West Sky this summer, shadowing Mariah and Captain Elena Morales. Alan Turner's journey continues in parallel. After his reprimand, he completed a restorative justice program alongside community leaders and now serves on West Sky's Advisory Council for Equity and Service. He frequently co-leads debriefings with Mariah, recounting his mistakes to crews so others won't repeat them. Both officers who drew their badges that day have left patrol duties to join joint outreach teams, teaching in classrooms, hosting workshops, even co-founding a youth center in their city's toughest neighborhood. As for Margaret Ellis, now 82, she rides free on any West Sky flight and has recorded a video message included in every safety demonstration: "Speak up if you see wrong. Kindness is never off duty." Mariah still carries Margaret's handwritten note in her wallet. 1 year on the sky doesn't feel quite as heavy. Change hasn't erased prejudice entirely, but it has shown that one courageous sentence and a chorus of supportive voices can turn a moment of injustice into a movement of lasting reform. This story reminds us that the fight against injustice is a shared responsibility transcending age, gender, and background. The clear message is that no one should remain silent in the face of abuse of power, and every testimony, every recording, may provide a crucial piece to dismantle the wall of prejudice. Now I invite you, the reader, to voice your perspective. What struck you most about this story? Which individual action do you believe is the most vital to prevent discrimination? And when do you predict racism will finally end? Please share your forecast for the moment when skin color no longer dictates anyone's fate, and tell us which measures you deem necessary to close that divide sooner. Because each of us, by speaking up and taking action, contributes to the force that reshapes society, bringing our community closer to genuine equality. Note, this story is entirely fictional and was created to raise awareness. It emphasizes issues of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We strongly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewers are encouraged to reflect thoughtfully.